On September 18, 2025, U.S. President Donald Trump made headlines when he declared that Washington is seeking to regain control of Afghanistan's Bagram Air Base. Just 4 years after American troops abandoned it during the chaotic 2021 withdrawal, the U.S. now says it wants the base back, calling it strategically vital, especially because of its location near China. Almost immediately, the Taliban government rejected the idea, saying no inch of Afghan soil would ever again be handed to foreign powers. But this raises some critical questions. What exactly is Bagram Air Base? How was it used during the U.S. presence in Afghanistan? Why did Washington abandon it in 2021? And why is it so important to America again in 2025? Most importantly, what happens if the Taliban refuses to give it back? And what could this tension mean for the future of U.S.-Afghanistan relations and for the wider region? In this video, we're going to dive deep into all of these questions and try to understand whether Bagram could once again become the center of global power struggles. So, let's start the video. To begin with, Bagram Air Base is located in Parwan province, about 40 kilometers north of Kabul. First constructed by the Soviet Union in the 1950s, it became the largest military installation in Afghanistan during the U.S. presence after 9/11. At its height, Bagram was not just a base, it was effectively a small city. It housed tens of thousands of troops, 2 runways, aircraft hangars, intelligence headquarters, and even the notorious Bagram prison, where detainees from counter-terrorism operations were held. For 2 decades, this base was the beating heart of the American war effort, supporting combat missions, airlifts, drone operations, and intelligence gathering across the country. So how did the U.S. leave it behind? In July 2021, just weeks before the Taliban seized Kabul, U.S. forces left Bagram in the dead of night without even informing their Afghan allies. Electricity was cut, equipment was abandoned, and Afghan commanders woke up to find the Americans gone. That decision, seen by many as symbolic of the rushed withdrawal, left a lasting impression. It not only ended U.S. military control in Afghanistan but also created an image of abandonment and defeat that the Taliban has used in its narrative ever since. Now 4 years later, why does the U.S. want Bagram back? The answer lies in geography and geopolitics. Bagram sits less than 600 kilometers from western China, close to Xinjiang, where Beijing keeps its most sensitive facilities, including missile bases and surveillance centers. It's also a short distance from Iran, Pakistan, and Central Asia. In other words, whoever controls Bagram has a forward operating hub in the very heart of Eurasia. That is why Trump described giving it up as a mistake, and why Washington now sees it as critical to its global strategy, especially in an era of heightened US-China rivalry. But for the Taliban, allowing the US to return is unthinkable. Afghan officials have been clear, not an inch of land will be handed back and no foreign troops will be allowed to return. They point to the Doha Agreement of 2020, in which the U.S. promised to withdraw completely and respect Afghan sovereignty. For the Taliban, giving Bagram back would not only undermine their legitimacy at home but also look like surrendering to foreign pressure, something their ideology and political base will not allow. So what happens if Afghanistan refuses? One likely scenario is that the U.S. will increase economic and diplomatic pressure, sanctions, freezing assets, and blocking recognition of the Taliban government. Another scenario could be attempts at secret negotiations, offering aid or political concessions in exchange for limited U.S. presence, perhaps under the guise of counter-terrorism operations. Yet with the Taliban publicly rejecting even the idea of negotiation, this seems unlikely to succeed in the short term. The bigger risk lies in what this tension means for the future. If the U.S. pushes too hard, it could strengthen the Taliban's ties with China, Russia, and Iran, all of whom oppose the return of American troops to the region. Beijing has already criticized Trump's plan, saying it would create confrontation and destabilize Afghanistan. For China, Bagram in American hands would be a direct threat just across its border. For Iran and Russia, it would mean renewed U.S. presence in their backyard. In short, a new Cold War front could open up right in Afghanistan. On the other hand, without Bagram, the U.S. loses a strategic vantage point in Central Asia. This limits Washington's ability to monitor groups like ISIS-K, Al-Qaeda, and other militants who still operate in Afghanistan. Already, intelligence reports suggest ISIS-K has regrouped in the east of the country, raising concerns about Afghanistan once again becoming a base for international terrorism. From a U.S. military perspective, having Bagram would make counter-terrorism operations far more effective than relying on over-the-horizon strikes launched from the Gulf. So, what is the most likely future of this tension? At this moment, a direct U.S. return to Bagram seems politically and militarily unrealistic. The Taliban is unwilling to compromise, and the U.S. would face massive resistance and regional backlash if it tried to retake the base by force. Instead, what we may see is a prolonged standoff, Washington continuing to demand, the Taliban refusing, and regional players like China and Russia using the dispute to strengthen their influence in Kabul. In other words, Bagram may remain symbolically contested, a powerful reminder of past wars and a bargaining chip in future geopolitical negotiations. One thing is certain, Bagram Air Base is more than just a strip of land with runways. It is a symbol of America's rise and fall in Afghanistan, a tool of global strategy, and now the center of a new diplomatic battle. Whether it remains under Taliban control or becomes part of a broader U.S. negotiation strategy, its importance will shape not just Afghanistan's future, but the balance of power in the region. Do you think the U.S. can realistically regain Bagram Air Base, or has Washington permanently lost its foothold in Afghanistan? And if the U.S. cannot return, what does that mean for America's ability to project power in Central Asia? Share your thoughts in the comments below.